House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 6 is called Smallfolk because the smallfolk, the lower classes, the lower orders, the peons, the plebs, they're going to be taking a much greater part in the story after basically being dragon fodder in Episode 4 and Episode 5 concentrating on the fallout from the Battle of Rook's Rest. We start out in the Westerlands with a Lannister army on the march in support of the Green faction, and Jason Lannister looks like a much less carefree man than the guy we saw in the hunting episode back in Season 1 Episode 3. He looks like a man weighed down by burdens. At the front of his army, he arrives at the Golden Tooth and announces he's marching no further until they have the protection of a dragon. The Lord of the Golden Tooth looks like he's had enough of Jason Lannister's nonsense, but there's nothing he can do about it. The Lannister army is staying put until they get the dragon they want from King's Landing. We cut to the Green Council and Prince Regent Aemond reading that message, and his response is, "He dares to summon me." Jason's twin brother Tyland, on the Green Council, leaps to defend his brother. Let's take a moment here to appreciate the actor who plays both of the twins. They're very noticeably different characters. I'm not sure they've ever been on screen together, and the show has done well to create a relationship between them. Tyland points out that given the threat of Caraxes and Daemon at Harrenhal, it's unreasonable for the Lannisters to proceed without some kind of dragon accompaniment, and the most reasonable form of that accompaniment would be Aemond on Vhagar. Aemond has different ideas. He sends Tyland to make an alliance with the Triarchy. The combined power of these three cities from Essos would hopefully negate the Sea Snake and stop the blockade of King's Landing. Alicent says the Triarchy are untrustworthy, and Cole, her friend with benefits, agrees. Jasper Wilde, who's getting a bit spicy, recommends the Greyjoys as the naval power who could help them out, who could tip the balance for the Greens. He proposes marrying Alicent to one of them. Jasper Wilde used to be angry, now he's snide. I think these council meetings have been one of the most successful parts of the show, as they've been very influenced by the character of the head of the council. Viserys' councils were calm, considered, and often indecisive. Aegon II's were angry, and now Aemond's are vaguely psychotic, with more open conflict and more of the indecision that characterized Viserys. So Tyland leaves to go to Essos to secure the naval alliance. Aemond and Alicent stay behind, and Aemond lets Alicent know, "Hey, Mum, you're not going to be on the council anymore." Aemond says she can return to more, dramatic pause, domestic pursuits. This seems to be a heavy hint that Aemond is aware of Alicent and Cole's relationship. Alicent begs him to reconsider. She feels he's pursuing a destructive path that he's chosen because of the indignities of his childhood, the mistreatment by his elder brother, and by the Strong Boys. Aemond won't hear any of this and walks away. The next scene cuts to Corlys Velaryon standing alone, waiting for the Black Council. But for the moment, I'm going to stay in King's Landing with the Greens, and we'll come to the Blacks later. Down in the city of King's Landing itself, we move to Ulf's bar. Well, not Ulf's bar, but the bar that we always see Ulf in. The man himself is sat at a table with a drink, and Rhaenyra's servant is spreading some sedition, some unrest. Or at least, it looked like she was a servant when she arrived in King's Landing in an earlier episode. But now it seems fairer to describe her as one of Mysarea's agents. While the city is struggling with the Sea Snake's blockade, Mysarea's agent tells stories of banquets at the castle and talks about how Rhaenyra, the rightful heir, has been denied her seat. Presumably, this agent has been doing this work all across the city and presumably isn't the only agent. Their work has been effective. The next time we see King's Landing, we're in the streets and Ulf is just one of a crowd harassing a wagon carrying food being taken to the Red Keep. No food for the people, they shout, but still sheep to feed the dragons. Back at the Green Council, Aemond doesn't understand the immediate problem that the Greens are facing. He sees that the removal of the blockade is a necessary war aim, but can't see how the mood of the city is relevant. This is kind of stretching credibility for me. How could he possibly not understand this? I'm pretty sure that the Master of Whisperers, Larys Strong, understands. So it seems like Larys is intentionally choosing to do a bad job, or at least choosing not to give Aemond the same level of attention that he's giving Aegon. Why would this be? Instead of enlightening the regent on the mood of the city, Larys suggests appointing a new Hand of the King, as the position is currently unoccupied. Aemond insults Larys and chooses to reappoint Otto Hightower. As Otto is not in King's Landing and is presumed to be somewhere in the Reach, hundreds of miles from King's Landing, this seems to be a time-wasting decision that fits with Larys's agenda of not fully supporting, if not actively undermining, Aemon's rule. Grandmaster Orwyle interrupts the council meeting to explain that King Aegon is conscious. Aemond goes to see his big brother and goes to see him alone. "What do you remember?" Aemond asks him in a clearly threatening way. Aemond tells his big brother that he challenged Maelys, which is the truth. That's what we saw. But it's the way he says it. It's quite clear what the dynamic is here. Aemond very much wants the power of being the regent, wants to keep it, and sees himself as the strong man compared to his big brother, which, fair enough, he is. But this is obviously a relationship that's in some deep conflict. Later on in the episode, we see Larys and the king talking in their chamber. Larys is a very taciturn and controlled character, but we see him treat the king completely differently to the regent. He denies the king the milk of the poppy, as he says it dulls the mind. Larys shares some of his experience of being disabled. People pity him, but they also underestimate him. We get a reference to what is perhaps Alys Rivers, or maybe her mother perhaps. When Larys was born and his father saw the disability, he accused a member of the household of casting spells. So yeah, that sounds like something Alys might do, or her mother, or some kind of life extension thing like we saw with Melisandre, but that's the fire religion, it's not the ice religion. How long have witches been established at Harrenhal? Perhaps longer than Harrenhal has existed, as the God's Eye is so close. In contrast to failing to explain the threat that's brewing in King's Landing, Larys tells Aegon that his life is in danger, and Aegon begs for his help. Things are coming to a head, both inside and outside the Red Keep. Let's go back to Dragonstone and Corlys Velaryon standing there waiting for the Black Council. He's wearing the pin of the Hand of the Queen that Rhaenyra sent to him last episode. The rest of the Black Council joins him, and being among these mostly nameless and unknown men seems to diminish Corlys by comparison. Rhaenyra enters and brings Sir Steffon Darklyn in with her. She asks him to attempt to ride Seasmoke, hoping that, as Sir Steffon has a distant Targaryen ancestor, he might not get eaten alive. Rhaenyra repeats the apparently endless arguments that the Black Council has been having this season. They have no army, she cannot fight herself, and the solution she's reached, as discussed with Jace in the last episode, is finding new dragon riders. Down in the caves below the castle, we see Rhaenyra singing or chanting or speaking a poem to call the dragon towards them. The dragon keepers, sweaty and nervous as ever, are standing there watching. At first, Seasmoke seems pliable, and Steffon moves towards the dragon with more than a hint of nervousness. As he approaches the dragon, he says, "I've done it," seemingly successfully calming Seasmoke with some basic phrases in Velaryon. And then it all goes incredibly badly, with Steffon Darklyn and at least one of the dragon keepers dying in walls of flame. So long, Sir Steffon. We barely knew you. Afterwards, Rhaenyra is walking the corridors of Dragonstone with Bartimus Seltgar. Bartimus, who's been one of the more disruptive and annoying voices on the Black Council, finally goes too far. Rhaenyra stops walking and slaps him. "It is my fault, I think, that you have forgotten to fear me." Let's be honest. Watching the members of the Black Council this season has been the kind of thing that makes you want to slap someone, so I really enjoyed this moment. More productive than the Black Council is Mysaria, the mistress of whisperers, while the council is bemoaning the lack of conventional and unconventional military power. Mysaria talks about the work her agents have been doing in King's Landing. The city is hungry, she says. The people are listening, presumably referring to the work we saw earlier with Ulf. They're going to do it tonight, Mysaria says, whatever it is. We'll come back to it later on. Let's have a look at the other storylines for Team Black. Over in the Vale, Rhaenyra, the children and the dragons are getting evicted and leaving to go over the narrow sea to Pentos. Rhaenyra is hanging out with the kids and one of the kids' dragons, just a small baby dragon. Their host is annoyed about being lied to about the size of the dragon. She wanted a dragon to protect the Vale, not just a small one. Rhaenyra is promised she'll be accompanied to Pentos by 6 good men, which seems like a reference to Bronn in Game of Thrones Season 1, talking about taking the Eyrie with, I think, 12 good men. I guess I'm kind of a sucker as I really enjoy these little callbacks. Over at Harrenhal, Daemon's psyche continues to get picked apart. We've seen him with his niece, wife, Rhaenyra. We've seen him with his mum in an even more uncomfortable situation. And for this episode, Paddy Considine returns as Daemon's brother Viserys. Where Daemon's previous visions were a bit more interactive, here we get Viserys repeating Daemon's exile from episode 1, following the Heir for a Day speech that got Daemon kicked out of King's Landing. Daemon's initial response to this is to tell the vision of his brother, "You can't still be angry about this." But once Viserys has finished speaking, the vision deviates from what actually happens. Viserys breaks down crying in front of him, which leads Daemon to try and get out of the room as fast as possible. Daemon is still running from the things that define him, and it seems that his relationship with his big brother is the ultimate thing that defines him. Once Daemon breaks out of the vision, he can't keep control of himself in reality. He asks Simon Strong, "What are you playing at, old man? You're a friend by day and a foe at night." He puts a knife to Simon's throat, which is essentially like putting a knife to a puppy's throat. He realises he's not quite in control of himself and leaves and goes to the weirwood. Caraxes is waiting there, gently breathing like a lazy cat in the sunshine, and Alys comes to meet him. "There's something wrong with me," he says. "Someone poisoned the food, the wine." I'd love to know where Daemon got this concern about poison from. I don't recall it being sourced anywhere before Daemon initially arrived in Harrenhal. Alys Rivers seems to have reached a point where she feels she can be more blunt and direct with Daemon. If something does not please you, you run. Dragonstone, the Stepstones, Pentos. You struggle to see there's an anger that blinds you. Alys seems to know a lot about politics for a wood witch a long way from King's Landing. She turns the conversation around to Daemon's immediate political problems. He asks for her help, and Alys says, 3 days, the winds will shift. Later on, Daemon has another vision involving his brother. This time, they're standing over the dead body of Queen Aemma. Viserys is crying, and Daemon comforts him. I guess this is what Daemon knows he should have done and wanted to do. It's also nice to see Paddy Considine used to do something new, rather than just a repeat. Daemon wakes to the news that the elderly Grover Tully is dead. Simon Strong says that Alys Rivers volunteered her skills with the elderly Lord Tully, but to no avail. I guess she's actually real then, not just a figment of Daemon's imagination. Simon leaves and Daemon breaks down into tears. I know it's been unpopular with many people. Personally, I've really enjoyed this exploration into Matt Smith's character, and forcing him to face the things that drive him has, for me, given a lot more meaning to the choices he's made in Season 1. Hopefully we can move on the plot from here, as I think meeting Viserys twice is getting to the root of Daemon's character. Back at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is moping on the castle walls. Jace joins her and repeats his previous ideas about the dragon seeds. Mysaria also joins them and explains to her that the gift is sent. They won't explain what the gift is. Jace is obviously annoyed. Jace is like the diplomatic chief of the faction. He's been to the Vale, he's been to the Starks and got them on side, and why are Mysaria and Rhaenys freezing him out? It seems bizarre. But anyway, then we see what the gift is. It's boats with food arriving outside the walls of King's Landing under Rhaenyra's banner. As people realise what's happening, they fight for the food, and it's causing chaos in the city. The chaos doesn't reach the Red Keep straight away. In the courtyard, Criston Cole and Alicent are mooning over each other while they chat to Alicent's brother. They discuss Daeron, Alicent's third son, 16, clever, adept with the lute and the sword, kind. Alicent makes the obvious contrast with her other sons. The Red Keep is not a great environment for raising children. So Cole leaves the city with Gwaine. Alicent goes to find Helena. They decide to go to the Sept, pray, and light a candle, unaware of the chaos that's rolling through the city. When they try to leave the Sept, they start to understand what's happening. The Kingsguard protecting them are Aegon's idiot lickspittles. Alicent orders them not to harm the rioters, but they ignore her, chopping a hand off one elderly man. Helaena and Alicent manage to escape, but the King's Guard are engulfed by the crowd. And even though they initiated the violence, they don't commit to it and stand there not knowing what to do, prevaricating like idle video game characters waiting for you to move them. The blocking of this scene doesn't really work and takes all the tension out of it. So the Greens have gone from what was technically an important military victory at Rook's Rest to dealing with serious unrest outside their own gates. Although supposedly winning the war at this point, it doesn't really feel like it. Over on Driftmark, Alan of Hull and Corlys are having another awkward conversation. "As my lordship commands," Alan says at one point, pushing away Corlys's attempts to be a bit more convivial. He's wearing a hat, and why is that exactly? Well, in the next scene we see Alan shaving his head. Presumably his hair is white, just like Corlys's. Adam points out that Alan is being kind of miserable, considering all the stuff that Corlys is giving him. "Me he ignores," Adam says. But later on, Adam's fortunes change. As he's working by the shore, he gets hunted down by Seasmoke the dragon, but not hunted in the way that Steffon Darklyn was. Seasmoke corners him and stares at him like a cat who wants to play. Did Steffon Darklyn give Seasmoke a taste for a rider? Finally, back over on Dragonstone, we see Rhaenyra and Mysaria having a bit of a pity party. Rhaenyra describes her and Daemon as two halves of a whole, herself the heir and cherished by her father, and Daemon carefree, dangerous, and most importantly, a man. I think there's a bit of hypocrisy here. Rhaenyra has definitely been carefree during the course of the series, but she hasn't really faced any consequences for her actions. Mysaria responds with the awful details of her childhood. The two go in to hug and then they kiss? Yeah, this was kind of awkward for me. So Mysaria reveals the details of basically being abused, and Rhaenyra's response is to initiate romantic activity with her. That seems kind of predatory. That seems like something a good person wouldn't actually do. But hey, apparently the actors felt like it, so I guess it must be the correct thing there. So the episode ends with Rhaenyra being delivered the news of Seasmoke having a rider, which makes her leave to find out what's happening. So that's House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6. I didn't really like the romantic stuff right at the end. As I say, it felt exploitative rather than natural. Overall, it's a very mid-season episode, but let's hope we pick up the pace a bit more with only 2 episodes left. Thanks for watching.